All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Bridget Nugent. I serve as the Deputy Director of Tompkins County Youth Services, and together with Scott McLeod from the Sophie Fund, coordinate the Tompkins County Bullying Prevention Task Force. We are very excited to present our slate of speakers on this important topic. The Tompkins County Bullying Prevention Task Force was formed in 2018 in an effort to bring together school staff, youth-serving community agencies, parents, and young people in order to respond to the issue of bullying. In the 2021 student survey, 21% of Tompkins County middle and high school students report having been bullied on school property in the last year, with another 21% reporting having been bullied electronically via social media, text, and email. Furthermore, only 37% of students report that in general, students treat each other with respect. Today's event is an effort to not only bring awareness to the issue of bullying with a focus on cyberbullying, but to hear from both national and local experts on strategies to put into practice, whether you are a parent, professional, or a concerned community member. Before we jump in, I'd just like to thank those individuals who helped organize and make this event possible: Scott McLeod, Sally Manning, Linda Smansky-Barr, Celia Clement, Kate Shanks Booth, and Melanie Little. The Tompkins County Bullying Prevention Task Force welcomes your involvement, and we will share with you after today's event more information on how to get involved. We have a full agenda today, and we'll move from one workshop to the next without any formal breaks. So please feel free to take breaks as needed, and you can use the Q&A function for any questions that might come up, and we will do our best to address them. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Samir Hinduja. Dr. Hinduja is the co-director of the Cyberbullying Research Center and a professor in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Florida Atlantic University. He is recognized internationally for his groundbreaking work on the subjects of cyberbullying and safe social media use. Thank you, Samir, and welcome.
Thanks, Bridget. It's good to be here. Just excited to hear that Tompkins County wants to focus on this issue and then figure out how so many stakeholders, so many individuals with platforms can make a difference in this area. And I think that intentionality will bear a lot of fruit. So I'm just looking forward to being a part today. With that said, I spend my life at the intersection of youth and technology, or youth and social media. And there's a lot of positives, which we'll talk about a few of them, but then of course the negatives that we hear a ton about. Now, all of you, I'm sure, work with youth in some capacity. And so I just want to say that the big picture is that all of us are spending our professional lives. We're co-laboring together in order to help shepherd them, in order to help mentor them, teach them the way that they should go, so to speak. And so that just has to continue. And I'm hoping that from the event today, it leads to more partnerships, more connections, and especially additional motivation and inspiration to do what we can. I have a little bit of time with you, not a ton. And so if you wanted me to perhaps go in depth about some subtopic for a little bit more time, I might not get to again during this presentation, but I hope that you reach out to me. It takes so much pride in getting back to people when they reach out to me. If you need a specific resource or additional research findings or some downloadables that help you with actionable strategies, I probably have them. It's very likely that our Cyberbullying Research Center has created them, or I'll point you to the right person with the resource or with the answers. And so don't reinvent the proverbial wheel. Again, we've got to continue to work together and do this efficiently. So I will share my slides. I'll talk a little bit about the research, and then we'll very quickly get into prevention and response. With regard to the slides, also know that if you just drop me a note afterwards, I'm happy to send you a PDF of them so you don't need to exhaust yourself trying to scribble down everything that I say. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll also just give a little tip of the hat to the team, and just want to say, Bridget and Scott, the rest of the team, Dominic, thank you so much for helping out with all the tech needs, with administration, with all that we needed to do in order to make this happen. And I'm sharing my screen right now. Perfect. And let's minimize all of these toolbars and windows that Zoom likes to give us. Okay. First, I do like to just share a little bit about myself, because sometimes that provides a necessary point of connection. Maybe you'll think, oh, I remember Samir for this reason. You know, he has a young family and they like to do what I like to do. So my wife, Rachel, my partner, Rachel, is over there on the top left. And then we have two little ones. Right in the middle is Maya. She's 4.5 years old. And she's just really spunky and fun. She just got her nails painted today and by Rachel. And my little boy in the bottom left is Ravi. And he's 2.5, and he is quite the handful, as many toddlers are. But I'm so grateful for them. And I'm just trying to raise them well, trying to be fully present, trying not to rush forward to the next season of life, even though it seems like they're exhausting and I definitely don't get enough sleep. But again, they're a blessing. And I hope that your family is kept safe and are doing pretty well despite all the chaos that's around us. I mentioned earlier that there are some positives related to social media and tech use. And so when I was growing up, I felt very lonely. I felt that I was struggling with things that no other kid was dealing with simply because I didn't know their story. But thankfully, in this day and age, many youth are gravitating online in order to speak up about what they're facing, what they're wrestling with. And it could be depression, it could be anxiety, could be eating disorders. Many of those youth are, of course, raising awareness. They're destigmatizing the need to reach out for mental health and counseling, and they're sharing stories of overcoming. And I think that's what's most powerful, because so many youth, and this was my story when I was growing up, were surveying the landscape to find someone out there who's just like us, but who has, again, overcome, who has pushed through adversity, who's making it, who's succeeding, despite all of the various things that we have to face. So again, that's one of the huge positives that's come out of the social media movement, so to speak. So then you think about cyberbullying, and of course, that's what our day is all about. I don't want to belabor this topic in terms of definitional issues, but just conceptualize it as, you know, using technology to be hurtful and cruel towards other people. There's usually that overlap with regular bullying or school-based bullying, which probably makes sense to those of you who are parents, where it's like, okay, my kid might deal with something at school, a little bit of drama or conflict, and then unfortunately it flares up after school hours online, whether it's on a gaming platform, whether it's, you know, during a live stream, whether it's via social media comments, etc. Way back in the day, many of us as parents were freaked out about stranger danger. And that was fair because, well, maybe it wasn't fair, but it was understandable because the media painted this disproportionate picture of what was going on with youth online, that they were being preyed on by predators and sexual deviants and so forth. And to be sure, that happens, but it happens to a much, much less frequent amount or degree than issues such as cyberbullying and some of the other topics that I study, for example, digital dating abuse and sexting and sextortion, etc. If you need any feedback about those issues, sexting, sextortion, revenge porn, which is a term that I don't love, but it's being used, digital dating abuse, etc., please follow up with me, because we've studied it and developed resources about it and to help with it, but we're going to focus on cyberbullying today. Then when you think about all these platforms, it gets overwhelming, you know, especially for a parent, because you're like, dear heavens, how am I supposed to carve out more time in order to learn about this app or this game or this new device that my kid is begging me for? And so I don't want you to get overwhelmed, because already we come to the table being a little bit freaked out based on what we've heard, whether it's in our school district or whether it's from our neighbors or, of course, on the news. Instead, my recommendation to you is to still focus on those root issues that undergird our goals of parents, guardians, caretakers trying to raise decent human beings. So what does that take? I mean, we want them to have a moral compass. We want them to be empathetic. We want them to be resilient, which I talked about earlier. You know, those sorts of issues still matter so much. And honestly, when we pay attention to those issues, they bear fruit online and offline. And again, that's the goal. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't get freaked out. Just continue to focus on what you know from how you were raised, from how your parents and grandparents were raised, in terms of what is most important. So just a few slides of stats, again, because I think it's important. Otherwise, we're just kind of grasping at straws in terms of understanding how big or how little this population is. Last year, we did a study with Cartoon Network, and tweens had never been studied before. Definitely, there's been a handful of studies on teenagers, but tweens, 9 to 12-year-olds, hadn't been studied before. And you can see what we found when it comes to the major genders. You see being bullied at school, about 1 out of 2. Being cyberbullied, about 14%. So maybe that's 1 out of 7, 1 out of 8. And on the right side of the chart, you see the numbers related to cyberbullying others and bullying others. So then just for a reference point, just for a bit of a statistical backdrop, as we think about what's going on amongst tweens, hopefully they're not getting devices too early. And if they are getting devices relatively early, hopefully they're receiving consistent and again, intentional instruction, not just from the school, but also from the guardians, which we'll talk about. So then thinking about teens. So 13 to 17-year-olds across America, all the studies that we do are nationally representative. They sort of represent the average US tween and then now teen. And you can see when we're thinking about school-based bullying, if you look at the second and the third group of bars, it's gone down from 51% in 2019 to 23% in 2021. However, this data was collected still during the pandemic. We're kind of still in the pandemic to some degree. So many kids, of course, are at home or quarantined or involved in hybrid school, et cetera. So that's why I think that decrease is there. And if you look at 2016 to 2019, you see the numbers increased when it comes to school bullying over the last month. Okay, so that's our reference point. Now let's move to cyberbullying. You can see from 2016 to 2019 to 2021, the dark blue is victimization, and we go from almost 17% to over 17% to over 23%. So that's approaching 1 out of 4 youth have been cyberbullied over the last month. And by youth, I mean, again, 13 to 17-year-olds. Seems like it's going up based on our data. Now, offending is decreased. There could be reasons for that. We could speculate. Maybe youth don't conceive of it as cyberbullying. Maybe they just conceive of it as banter or something like that. But in terms of self-reporting offending, it's gone down from 6.6% to about 5%. But here's the kicker. Over half of those who dealt with cyberbullying in the last month said it deeply affected their ability to learn and feel safe at school. Now, there are some well-meaning adults, and maybe you're one of them, who would say something to a youth who comes to them for help with cyberbullying. Oh, why don't you just delete that app? Or, man, I see you on the phone all the time. So if you're on the phone all the time, this is bound to happen. Maybe you should put down your phone and go outside. So, logically, we understand the sentiment wanting to be expressed there, but that's very dismissive. It trivializes what's going on, and it doesn't help the problem or the student at all. As we also know, youth moves seamlessly from one realm to the other, offline to online. There's no distinction when it comes to kids. It's just their life. And so that's how we have to conceive of it, even though we might still demarcate the two. Okay, so now that we've set the backdrop of research, let us get into prevention and response. And the first thing that I want to say, oh man, communication matters so much. And that might seem very elementary, but from where I stand and working with so many parent groups and schools around the nation, it feels that many parents are hyper involved in their kids' offline lives, whether that's football or hockey or dance or cheerleading, et cetera. But they're a little bit, maybe a lot of it, hands off when it comes to their kids' online lives. And I understand why. They haven't grown up with the technology. They're not fully in the loop related to what kids are using these days. They don't want to sound like a moron if they don't use the proper jargon. They're trusting that the school and the county is covering this, and they are. But again, we need a united front. We need parents to also do so as well. So what could this look like? I mean, I would love for you to go online with your kids. And I know that might be tricky, but how about you just decide to take a quick trip to Starbucks or Baskin Robbins or Krispy Kreme, and you order your favorite treats, and you sit down at the table at the restaurant with a device, get on the Wi-Fi, and just have this pro-social, non-judgmental chat about, hey, what are you loving these days about certain apps or certain platforms? How are they meeting your needs? Keeping you connected even when you're physically distant from your buddies, etc. They can, of course, teach you if you catch them in the right moments. And yeah, it gets to help you enter their world. You should start early, not to say that middle school is too late, but my 4-year-old, she's pretty adept at grabbing my phone and scrolling over to YouTube and watching a few cartoons. And, she loves Toca World and Toca Pets. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that sort of ecosystem of apps where you just get to do a lot with your fingers in terms of moving and opening doors and dressing people, etc. But yeah, she takes the iPad and she's able to just astound me with what she's able to create. Plus, I work with elementary schoolers every single weekend in our community organization, and I work with middle schoolers and high schoolers during the week. So again, I have a feel for what's going on, and I want you to somehow become a little bit more involved in their online lives. Plus, we have to watch our own words. You and I are very capable of being a jerk when we're having a rough day, when we're cranky, when the toddler's waking us up in the middle of the night over and over and over again. It's okay. We're human. We just have to kind of call ourselves out when we make a mistake. So if I snap at my child, it's a couple minutes later, hopefully it's like, oh, nuts. I'm so sorry, son, daughter. There's no excuse for me really to have said that way in such a sharp, biting tone. Please forgive me. And in that moment, it's a teachable moment. And she will remember that, okay, he messed up, but he asked for forgiveness and he tried to make things right. And that's what's most important, recovering. Plus, in our family, we're big on family standards. In my living room, which is where the TV is, where we have the couches, where we spend all of the time, we have this on the wall, Hinduja family values. And, Rachel and I, we put a lot of thought into cobbling together a list of, let's say, 10 or so, maybe these are 9, I don't remember. But yeah, just trying to figure out like what we want our family to sort of emulate continually, for the rest of our lives. And the cool thing is that when our kids mess up, or maybe even when I mess up, I can point to the sign and I could be like, you know what, that didn't really depict or demonstrate servant leadership. I didn't really sort of portray a lot of humility with, how I was kind of bragging about that, something like that. And of course, when our kids mess up, we do it, but in a very loving, unconditionally loving manner. But it's been really, really great. And I would love for your families to come up with this, formalize it, and create some sort of emblem that represents it, because then you can point to it as these years go on about what you're all about. When it comes to having conversations with our kids, again, I mentioned that that's a bit challenging. On our website, we have a document called Questions Parents Should Ask. This is just some of those questions. Check that out. Maybe in the chat room, I'll be able to type in my web address. Otherwise, you can easily find it online. But the goal is to, again, start very pro-socially with innocuous or vanilla type questions. And then over time, not just like, okay, you heard Samir speak today, this evening, you're going to pull your kids aside and kind of grill them. No, bad idea. Over time, as you build up a bit of rapport about these online sort of technologies and platforms, then you can get into the more probing questions. But please stretch it out, take some time so you don't freak out your kids and they put up walls and shut you out. I also want to bring up the topic of resilience, simply because that's very near and dear to my heart. When I think about resilience, I think about a rubber ducky and how, okay, you push it under the water and what happens? It pops back up to the surface in a bathtub, for example. We kind of want our youth to be like that. I mean, without a doubt. And yes, for sure, our default when our kids are victimized in any capacity is to sort of rush in, swoop in, rescue them. I get that. I'm a parent. You understand this. It's our default. But I would also say that many, not all, but many forms of bullying and cyberbullying, they're minor, they're mild. Maybe they're moderate, but they're not severe. Most. Some are, and I would never tell a child to grow in resilience or work with them to grow in resilience when it comes to severe targeting or severe victimization. But by and large, most of it is mild. Name calling, insults, rumors, a mean-spirited comment, etc. And we would want our children to understand that this is just part and parcel of life. You're going to deal with it in the workforce with coworkers. You might be dealing with it when it comes to in-laws, and so we want you to, over time, develop a toolbox of resilience in the safe and protected environment of our home. And as you practice and sort of like get your bearings and learn the ropes when it comes to dealing with social and relational conflict in this protective setting, you'll be a lot better off in the future. Otherwise, the question is, are we ill preparing our kids for the future because we're always swooping in and rescuing them? My wife's family's out in rural Virginia, and near their property, there are a number of maple trees. And so every February, so that's coming up, every February they would go out and they would tap these maple trees and they would bring in the syrup. And of course, in the kitchen, there would be this fun quality time like activity where, we would boil the syrup and put it into jars and wrap bows around it with some hot glue and then give it to loved ones. And this comes to mind only because resilience is innate. It's an innate trait. It's not where like some kids have it and some kids don't have it. And so I think that's very encouraging, very promising. It's just up to me and up to you as youth serving adults or adults who care about youth to sort of bring it out of them, to sort of bolster it with environmental, which is us, supports. We wrote an article on resilience. And so, I could spend a whole hour talking to you about various strategies and solutions on resilience, but I only have a time for a few of them. You can follow up with me later. But what we found in our research, before I tell you a couple strategies, is as follows. First off, big picture, those kids with the highest levels of resilience, when they were cyberbullied, or by the way, when they were bullied, it didn't deeply affect them emotionally. It didn't make them really struggle at school. Whereas those with the lowest levels of resilience, when they were bullied or cyberbullied, it wrecked them and they weren't really able to function well at all in school. And of course, they struggled mightily when it comes to their emotions. But this chart primarily depicts something really cool. So if your kid was being cyberbullied, what would you hope happens? You would hope they would engage in what are called pro-social responses, such as maybe they talk to someone at school, like the counselor or the teacher. Maybe they try to get help from the site or the platform. They report the aggressor. Maybe they change their screen name in an effort to not really deal with this nonsense anymore. Maybe they call the police if it's serious, with your help, of course, delete their account, block the aggressor, log out, etc. That's what we would want, because that would demonstrate that they feel in control of their online experience. And they also feel like they have the agency and autonomy to not just take it like a punk, so to speak. They're not just going to take it. They're going to do something about it. Unfortunately, those kids with the lowest levels of resilience, according to our national research, oh man, they did nothing. They just suffered silently. And that breaks my heart, because it's like you do have these tools at your disposal within the apps, within the platforms, to control who talks to you, who messages you, who even sees your posts. Have you embraced those features and functionality to your advantage? What else can you do in terms of help seeking? That's what we want. And maybe it's also on us to kind of remind youth of those possible action plans. What's listed here are what are called helper words or helper phrases. It might sound, again, very pedantic and simple, but these are actually very important, because if you think about it, when you or I are dealing with some sort of adversity, we probably say something to ourselves in our head, maybe even under our breath, maybe while stealing our jaw, that helps us to push through, that helps us to overcome. Maybe you're finishing a set at the gym. Maybe you're finishing a run. Maybe you're dealing with a home repair, which is just so annoying and it's taking forever, but you're like, I'm gonna do this. Well, we want youth to have at the tip of their tongue, at the top of their mind, a list or at least a few of these helper words, these positive affirmations that can help them to push through. You might think everyone's got them, they just come up with them, but many youth don't. They struggle and they get stuck and they get paralyzed in these moments. So work with them on identifying what they can say to really, again, get them over the hump. There's also a model out of the University of Pennsylvania, which I think is really cool and applicable. It's the ABC model, adversity, beliefs, and consequences. So we face adversity, and in terms of what we're talking about today, that would look like peer conflict, bullying, cyberbullying, online aggression, toxicity, hostility, etc. So you face that adversity, whatever it is, and immediately, almost subconsciously, you will adopt certain beliefs to come to terms with the adversity, to explain it away, to deal with it so that you can move on instead of just falling apart. But unfortunately, so much hinges on those beliefs. Are they healthy beliefs or are they unhealthy beliefs? And what we're finding is that these beliefs, they could undermine resiliency and they could lead to these really problematic consequences, internalizing problems, externalizing problems, etc. So what I will say is that when a child, my child, your child, is being targeted, they immediately get lost in a fog of heavy emotions, such as the ones to the right of the arrows in this list. Like you get so angry, you just want to rage, or you feel very bummed out, super sad, super depressed, or you struggle with anxiety and fear, or you feel a ton of embarrassment and humiliation as to what that other person posted or said about you. But what we need to do is to work with our kids to get them to step backwards from that heavy emotion, to think through, okay, what has led to the heavy emotion? Is it a legitimate explanation here? And so through that process, they ideally can understand how the emotions just take over sometimes in an illogical fashion, in an unreasonable fashion. And of course, they're teenagers. You remember what it's like to be a teenager we respond so reactively and so dramatically when awful things happen to us because we haven't lived enough years to have that reference point. But through this process, it's just so very valuable. Let me try to break it down in a real world example. Let's say that I'm a girl and I see this on Instagram. This is my adversity. I did not get invited to the slumber party. So this could go a couple of ways. So one way could go is as follows. What the heck? They had a sleepover without me? I can't believe this. Man, I am crushed. What in the world? Like, I thought I was part of their squad. I thought I was part of their crew, and maybe I'm actually not. Maybe I'm on the outside. Maybe I've always been on the outside. Maybe they get together all the time without me. Maybe right now at the sleepover, they're having conversations about me, belittling me, talking down about me, insulting me. Actually, this confirms what happened a couple of weeks ago. And hey, what happened a couple of months ago? And actually, my entire life is a litany of these types of experiences where I'm always on the outside. This is how it's always going to be, just forever alone. This is life. You see how quickly that just devolved into chaos based on my heavy emotions. But instead, ideally what can happen is, this is how it goes. Okay, man, I am bummed out that they had a sleepover without me. I so wish that I was there, but okay, maybe they just got together after soccer practice and we weren't there because we were still on holiday. And maybe the mom said, you can just have 3 other girls. And I wasn't there, otherwise they would have invited me. And plus, they're not responsible for how much fun I'm going to have in my life. Maybe I could talk to my mom about me organizing and having a sleepover this weekend. And oh man, it is going to be legendary. So there again, it's all about the beliefs we adopt. That's part of resilience. We want them to have healthy interpretations and healthy beliefs because it's so easy to see the dark side of everything. And that's just not the direction in which we want them to go. I'm a big fan of books, and maybe your child is as well. These are books where resilience is a dominant theme of the protagonist. And I can, if you want to, drop me a note and say, my kid is this many years of age. And I'm happy to recommend specifically some books for that child. But these are my favorite. And what I'm really trying to get across is that some of these are life-changing to me even. Like I can remember Of Human Bondage and Philip Carey and his story of deformity and how that inspired me because he was dealing with all the insecurities that I dealt with when I was growing up, but he pressed through. Count of Monte Cristo, many of us have read that book as well. So just stories are so very powerful because our kids can see themselves in it, and it can help sort of wrap parameters around all of the uncontrollable things that we're feeling, that we're facing as well. These are my favorite movies where I would say that resilience is a dominant theme. You have your own, and I would say almost every movie has a strong theme of resilience. But here's the thing. Are we having conversations with our child after we watch the movie about the take-home message, about, hey, how does this apply to your life? And maybe you can't do that immediately at night because they need to brush their teeth and go to bed, but maybe the next morning at breakfast, in the carpool lane, whatever it is. We have this running joke in my family and in my extended family where, I tell them like, I don't want to watch a movie unless it has the power to change my life. And they're like, dude, you have got to lighten up. Like, can't you just enjoy a movie and laugh? I'm like, no, I want to be inspired. I need to be inspired on a daily basis. So these are movies that can inspire. And we want them to, again, quote unquote, change the life of a youth where they remember, oh, I remember the storyline and I really resonated with what this character had to go through. And man, I can make these similar choices or have this similar mentality to overcome relational conflict, trolls online, hateful speech, etc. This is my dad and my sister. My dad and my mom came over from India before they had us, just because they wanted a better life for their future children. And they didn't really know a soul. And my point here is that it's a story of resilience and overcoming. And you parent, guardian, caretaker, you have stories of resilience in your life as well. I know it's tricky because it's like, man, when am I going to have a captive audience where my kids really care about my life stories? But just look for those opportunities. They're there. And then down the road, maybe they'll be like, wow, I remember what my mom was telling me or what my stepdad was telling me. It's in our family, it's who we are. I can rise up as well. So convey these stories when you get a chance. They matter, they really do. I also think about empathy, and empathy, of course, has to do with, feeling the feelings of another person, but it also has to do with understanding their feelings, even if you don't agree with them. And that's kind of lacking in society today. And of course, we won't go into that, but I don't want to see empathy only when we have a school shooting, which is of course portrayed in this picture, you know, the crowd and the students, et cetera. We want to see empathy as just something that's normative adolescent behavior. Is that idealistic? Maybe, but I also see a lot of youth doing epic things when it comes to raising awareness for social justice issues, caring about the downtrodden, speaking up online about people who don't have a voice. So maybe, just maybe, it's closer than we think. We just have to do our part. We did research on empathy, again, national research, and what we found, just to summarize this, students with low empathy, they're, you know, almost 2 times as likely to bully someone at school in the last month and over 2 times as likely to cyberbully. And then students with high levels of empathy were over 2 times less likely to bully and almost 3 times less likely to cyberbully. We would think empathy matters, but it really, 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 really matters. I could spend a whole hour talking about empathy strategies, and I don't have that time, but you can follow up with me. Just a few points for you. These are my favorite shows where empathy is dominant in the main character, and you'll recognize some of them. I have to believe a few of you grew up with My So-Called Life and Angela Chase and Jordan Catalano, et cetera. Daniel Tiger, of course, my kids watch, and they used to watch Wish and Proof. Humans of New York, I'm sure you're familiar with, True Life, et cetera. So all of these are very powerful in terms of depicting what empathy is all about in action. And here are my favorite books related to empathy as well. Feel free to follow up with me on any of this. Again, I told you at the onset that I'm happy to send you a slide, my slide deck in PDF format, but we want our children to be inspired. We want our children's hearts to be softened. And along that line, I think a lot about Tim Tebow. I'm a big fan of him, and maybe you're a Jets fan, and so you possibly cared about Tim Tebow back when he was playing for the Jets. Maybe you're also a Gators or a Broncos fan. I don't know. By the way, my apologies to Bills fans. I mean, that was heartbreaking, incredibly, incredibly heartbreaking. And I'm so sincere because I love sports. I feel that pain very deeply. So when it comes to Tim Tebow, I simply want to say that he organizes these, let's say, proms. They're called Nights to Shine, or a Night to Shine, for youth with special needs every spring. And he enlists the help of students without special needs to come and serve as waiters or ushers or fellow dance partners. And so they build relationships, right? You know, they connect with those other youth, and it's really cool and really meaningful and really special. And I'm sure that those youth without special needs, when they arrived on the scene, they probably felt a little bit awkward, like, how am I going to connect with these other youth, et cetera, just because they're different, you know, and they are different, you know, that's a fact of the matter. But they push through that, right? And they develop these, again, incredible friendships. So my take home for you here is that how are we intentionally putting our youth in situations that can soften their heart, that can even break their heart, because I think that's so necessary. I'm Indian, as you can tell, and my parents went to India with me and my sister multiple times as we were growing up, because my grandparents were over there and my uncles and aunts and cousins, et cetera. So I would say my heart was irreparably shattered, because we would go to Mumbai and we would see the street kids, you know, we would see them come up to our car window, putting their hand to their mouth, you know, wanting just a little bit of food or a little bit of money so they could buy a little bit of rice just to survive that day, truly. And you know the stats about how many kids die of starvation every single day in our world. And it crushed me. I saw deformity based on malnutrition. I saw so much pain and sadness, and that has without a doubt changed my life. And, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I think this is important. From that point, I grew up, and, you know, now I'm in the point where it's like, I want to do all that I can for India. And to date, we have built 16 clean water wells in that subcontinent, and we're going to keep doing so. We've also built a couple of children's homes. And so that matters, right? Like, we want to take care of these kids, because my heart was pricked. My conscience was pricked, sensitized when I was growing up. So the point is that as we do that right now, yes, it'll bear fruit when they're in their youthful years and adolescence, but it'll also bear fruit in terms of them making an incredible difference in their adulthood. How are you intentionally placing your youth in situations where their heart can break? There's possibilities all around you in your community. You don't have to go to India. Here's some household rules. I'll just go through these quickly because they're very intuitive. If your grades go down, your tech use is going to go down. And if you stop helping us out in terms of chores like our family, then your tech use is going to go down. You've heard about, yeah, we got to have the phone in a designated location on school nights, 9 p.m., let's say. But the thing is that our kids are so willing to give up sleep just to stay in touch with their friends via snaps back and forth or text back and forth, or even FaceTiming till 1 or 2 in the morning because they have their phone in bed with them. Just like you and I were very willing to give up sleep to talk to our best friend about our latest crush or a drama at school up till 1, 2 in the morning, again on the telephone, even though we had to get up for high school at 6. So yeah, we don't want them to be cranky, irritable, and not able to pay attention and learn at school. And we don't want them to be short with us because they haven't gotten enough sleep. And then the last point there, requiring financial responsibility. Maybe you just have them pay 10% of the cell phone bill every month, just as a periodic reminder that it does cost something. It is not a right, it's a privilege. And maybe they'll remember that because it's like, okay, I got to pony up a little bit every single month. Instead of just assuming that, okay, they're paying for the internet, they're paying for all these devices, our smart TVs, our gaming platforms, etc. We want them to understand that there's responsibility that's attached to these privileges. I saw this on Twitter a few years ago and I loved it. My new requirement is that if my kid wants to download a new app, she has to write a one-page report on the founders, the company story, and the business model so she understands how the app benefits from her use. I mean, that just makes you chuckle, right? Like, that's awesome, because we want them to go into this with open eyes, understanding that, yes, we're provided various sorts of apps, but there's a profit motive, and there's, stockholders that companies are beholden to. And, there's a reason why all this data is collected and then farmed. One of my wife's friends, Bree, I kid you not, she came up with this. They actually built a bed for devices, and they put those devices in bed before they go to sleep. And all of the kids wake up and don't get the devices until a little bit after, because the devices sleep longer than the humans do. And I know this wouldn't fly with high schoolers, but if your kids are super young, then maybe you could do this. Like, it's a really unique sort of idea, and I like it. And it just helps you with the standards. You might recognize Gwyneth Paltrow. She received a bit of grief from her daughter, Apple, when she posted this picture without permission. Apple just said something snarky in the comments about, just how she's sharing things, as they say. Now, the point here is that it would have been ideal if Gwyneth had asked her daughter for permission to upload this picture, because there's a million reasons why the teenager doesn't want the picture online. And the reason why we do that is complicated because, okay, maybe you're like, it's not a big deal, and they're going to say no to everything. And I do want to share these moments of my life, which is my family, with my loved ones. But we also want to serve as a good model, because we would want Apple or your child to ask permission to their friends before they post pictures or videos of their friends without permission. Like, you should get that permission. It's just human decency. It's just courtesy. So again, we have to be the models. These are some statistics involving parents' risky driving behaviors. So we've got 40% admitting to texting while driving. That's 2 out of 5. That's a big deal. 1 out of 5 not wearing a seatbelt while driving. 4 out of 5 speeding, etc. So this is just a simple reminder. And again, we know this, but it's a simple reminder that our kids are sponges, and they're watching our every move, and they're going to use it as justification for their own risky behaviors. What are you doing on the roads? And more pertinent to what we're talking about today, what are you doing with your devices? Are you constantly on it? Are you ignoring them? I don't want you to feel condemned or indicted, because sometimes, very frankly, you and I just need a break from the constant pestering or the constant questioning or whatever it is. And this just helps us to zone out for a couple of minutes. For example, me, I just want to check what my favorite sports teams' blogs are saying about a potential trade or the upcoming game or whatever. I just need a couple of seconds to clear my head. So we look at our phone. So again, don't feel condemned, but always remember, again, what is the example we're setting? One of my colleagues, Dana Boyd, came up with the term narrative parenting. And I really like it because, again, we're on our phones. And yes, I could be looking at the latest sports scores, but frankly, you and I use our phones for a lot of legitimate professional reasons. Like, I need to use Venmo to send over some money to a babysitter, or I need to check the weather so I know how to dress my kid in the morning for school so they're not freezing or not too hot. I need to make sure my mortgage got paid. I need to check into this or that. You get it, legitimate reasons. And so if we narrate what we're doing, oh, I'm just checking the weather so that we know what to pack for our upcoming vacation. Or, I'm just checking to see what, the economic chief Powell said yesterday in his remarks related to what the economy is going to do and what they're going to do about tightening or QE, whatever. So the point there is that it's super boring to a kid, but at least they know that you're not just mindlessly scrolling through Instagram and like wasting time, which you might give them a hard time about. So I just want to say that it's really rough dealing with like screen time and trying to figure all this out. We get these recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics, where we're supposed to have like no screen time until 18 months. And then from 18 months to 5 years, we're supposed to have like only an hour. And after 5 years, we're supposed to have maybe a little bit more than an hour, but make sure that it's incredibly educational. But then when you look at the actual research, by 2 years of age, kids are having at least on average 3 hours of screen time every single day. Maybe that's just guardians and parents trying to cope. I don't know, but that's the reality. So we get these recommendations and then we feel super shamed and extremely guilty because we're not living up to the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines. It's rough. It's so rough. And so what I want you to do in terms of how to deal with all this is, number one, work with your child, negotiate with them to figure out what it's going to take for them to earn screen time. So, whether they have to accomplish this or that or this, and that's how it is in my household as well. I mentioned my 4-year-old loves Toca Worlds or Toca Pets on the iPad, but she's got to earn it. She's got to do certain chores, even at 4, and she does them. And then I want you to ask yourself these simple questions to help you gauge how things are when it comes to your child. That way you're not going to feel, again, condemned by these guidelines or other recommendations you might hear on the nightly news. Are they doing okay socially? Are they achieving well in school? Do they have other hobbies? Are they not just consuming, but creating online, whether it's pictures, videos, content, etc.? That's what's most important. And of course, their physiological health. We're getting close to wrapping up here, and I'll open it up for Q&A. This is something I am a little nervous about when I think about my children doing Google searches, because they're going to eventually run into inappropriate content. And by that, I mean porn. So I know we're talking a lot about cyberbullying, but these are just huge questions that parents always ask me. So I wanted to, get in front of them with you. So with regard to this, it's easy to think I'm just going to set up my home as Fort Knox and have all these routers and software, et cetera. But that doesn't decrease significantly the likelihood of this happening, because your kids have friends and they have other ways to get online, and they're eventually be seeing something you're not happy with. So what I think we should do to get in front of this is have those conversations about that quote unquote inappropriate material, about porn, et cetera, depending on how old your kids are. And then I want you to convey to them over and over again that this is a judgment-free zone. Even if you have to create a sign in your house, just to remind yourself, because our kids are so nervous to come to us. They're afraid we're going to freak out at them. We're going to make it a huge deal across the entire school, where then they're targeted additionally for increased retaliation and harm, where they are going to have their technology taken away from them, where you're going to delete certain apps. They can't risk that. It's like oxygen to them. And we're going to convey blame, maybe not with our words, but maybe with our body language. And so that's why they don't talk to us. Over and over again, as we've studied this over the years, they're very hesitant to talk to parents and guardians. Frankly, they're very hesitant to talk to educators, but we're trying to break through that. And I know all of you, in Tompkins County are doing your part to get them, to give you a chance to come through for them. But we have to keep sounding the alarm there, carrying the torch or ringing the bell, however you want to say it. Just create a judgment-free zone. On our website, we have expectations for the child. Like, I'm not going to download pirated software, meet up with strangers that I met online, et cetera. But the parent also has expectations. This is really important because your child wants to know that you're going to be calm, reasonable, rational, and not take drastic measures. Check out this sort of technology use contract online on our website and read over it, and maybe print it out, sign it, post it in an invisible location. Again, reminding everyone as to what they'd agree to related to technology use in the home. One of my colleagues, Dr. Kristen Matheson, has come up with these would you rather flashcards, but specific to digital citizenship, which of course we know can help reduce the prevalence of cyberbullying. We're familiar with would you rather, like, would you rather die in a fiery volcano or die freezing to death floating on an iceberg in Antarctica? For me, probably the latter, but that's the would you rather game. But these are all related to digital citizenship. And it just allows you as a caregiver to start the ball rolling when it comes to dialogue, when it comes to conversation involving social media and tech. Again, you don't want to get all critical or judgmental. You just want to chat with them. Use these flashcards. There's so many more as part of the Would You Rather digital citizenship set. If you have trouble finding it, please reach out to me. We also have scripts on our website. It's called Cyberbullying Scripts, showing you how easy it is to have a conversation with your child on different platforms about online harassment. Not that you're going to act it out in some sort of skit-like fashion, but just again, giving you some talking points. Cyberbullying Scripts. We also have, I've written 23 scenarios focused in on different types of technologies, different forms of harm online, and you can perhaps read the role-playing scenarios and you can ask the follow-up questions. Here we just had some hate and harassment going on a game on Xbox Live, on Overwatch. Perhaps you're familiar with it. It's extremely popular. So my point here is that on our website with these scenarios, we also have follow-up questions. That, of course, is key, right? Because you want to have the conversation with them about what they should do, what they shouldn't do, who they should go to for help, how they can report, etc. Because again, we want them to have an action plan. If they never thought through what to do via the use of scenarios, by the way, which research shows is so valuable, then they're just going to get stuck. Just a reminder here, tell your kids to take screenshots. They probably know how on their phones, but do they know how on their PlayStation, on their Xbox, on their iWatch, on their Kindle? We need screenshots. The school needs it for investigations, and social media companies need it also to get problematic accounts deleted and for hateful content taken down. We also need screen recording. You can set this up in Control Center on iPhones as well as on Android phones as well. We have a document called Making Screenshots, which shows you how to do that as well. And here again is this Android where you can set it up. Screen recordings are important because we know TikTok stories, not TikTok stories, TikTok videos, Snapchat stories, Insta stories, streams like live streams on Facebook, live streams on Twitch. If it's hateful, if it's harassing, if it's cyberbullying, we need the evidence. And so you would use screen recording tools to capture it. When your child's a target, stay calm. Make sure that they're safe. And of course, I mentioned about the importance of evidence. Work with the school, but please, it's tricky. I know we want answers immediately, but give them time to do their investigation, to follow the rules related to FERPA. Like, they're not going to be able to tell you how they disciplined the aggressor after their investigation. Give them time and understand that they're part of a system, a bureaucracy, much like many of us in organizations. And it just takes time to make sure that it doesn't open them up to legal or reputational liability. Avoid venting on Facebook about what the school is or is not doing. Again, give them some time and work with the offender's parents. You can also contact the service provider. What that means is that you reach out to Instagram or Snap or whoever. If you have problems with that, please reach out to me, again, with screenshots or screen recordings. I will call up a colleague at these platforms and we will figure it out to make sure your child is not further harmed. And then contact the police as necessary. When your child bullies others, cultivate empathy. We talked about that earlier. Our kids are not sociopaths. Many times they just make a mistake. Of course, sometimes it is super severe and there's incredible consequences, and that's a major deal. And I'm not talking about cultivating empathy in those situations. Monitor usage, consider software, which I'll end with, and then set limits and make sure you're not a pushover. That's tough, right? We got to escalate the consequences when the behavior continues. It's hard being a parent. It's so hard. If you were to ask me recommendations, I would recommend to you Circle Plus. You can check it out at your leisure, but it's very granular in terms of what you can control, whether it's, setting time limits for Minecraft or Roblox or TikTok or whatever, turning on certain devices, turning off certain devices at different periods of the day, depending on how old your kids are, etc. And then I also like Bark, which allows you to, again, do the on and off type toggling, setting time limits. You can set sensitivities for them flagging you when there's certain texts or messages that include certain keywords that are problematic. But if you set the sensitivity too high, you will be inundated and super annoyed by all the false positives you receive. But you can try out the software and just check it out because it might be useful if you need to install this sort of thing. It takes a village. I'm so grateful for your time and your attention today. We have so many other awesome speakers the rest of our time together. And I'll be coming back at 4 p.m. to talk specifically to educators about what can be done. But with that, I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for Q&A. And again, I can follow up with you at any point if you want to discuss personal situations, talk in detail with me about a certain question that you have, etc. Thank you again for your time and your attention, and I'll stop sharing my slides.
Thank you so much for all the wonderful information. It certainly gave me many things to reflect on as a parent myself. So yeah, I think we have a few minutes here for questions. If anyone has them, you can put them in the Q&A box and we'll be able to send those on over.
Real quick, related to software, I simply want to say, number one, that I don't have any professional relationship with these companies. I'm not recommending them to you because I get a kickback. That's just a number one question that I received. So I wanted to give you some input. And then secondly, please don't install software behind your child's back, because that will kill any open line of communication you've perhaps worked years to build with that child. Tell them while you're doing it, tell them that, this is just how it goes in terms of the rights and responsibilities and privileges that you have involving the tech use that I'm willingly giving you. It doesn't matter what your friends have or don't have. Doesn't matter what your friends' parents are doing or are not doing. This is just how it is in our household.
Okay, we've got a couple questions coming in. The first one is, do you see any issues with checking your child's phone messages?
I do not. And that's a tricky one, right? Because if they're 17, we're thinking they probably deserve some measure of privacy. And I would agree there, as long as they haven't violated your trust over the course of these many years. Because when we were growing up, we wanted more freedoms, but we would hope that our parents would let out their proverbial leash, so to speak. I know that's not the best analogy, but just go with me for a second. But of course, if we messed up, then there's got to be consequences. We have to sort of be reined in a little bit. But if we haven't violated their trust, I definitely wanted more privileges. I wanted more freedoms. You should have the right to go through your child's texts. You should have the lock code of their phone. And it's not like you have the time to be checking it every day or even every week. Maybe you do so a few times a year, but at least there's that deterrent message being put forth where it's like at any given time, my parents could go through my camera roll to make sure I don't have any inappropriate photos. They could go through my texts, not to be in my business, but just to make sure I'm not talking to people I shouldn't be talking about or using language I shouldn't be using, etc.
Great, thank you. We have another question regarding universities. What prevention should universities take to avoid cyberbullying?
Yeah, so that's sensitive to my heart because I'm a university professor, and we've had students who have had their parents even meet up with me, with the students, of course, talking about cyberbullying instances. It's really rough. And just because they're in university doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden they're able to capably handle social and relational conflict. We all develop differently, and much grace must be extended. The university should absolutely have policies. And secondly, they should have programming. That could look like some sort of formal presentation. That could look like training for the staff and for the educators and professors in terms of, hey, do you know what to do if a student in your undergrad or graduate class came to you and they were being targeted or sexually harassed online, which of course happens to an increasing degree at the college level. So there should be a game plan in place, and the university is falling short, or the college is falling short if that's not happening.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have a couple more minutes left. Any other questions for Dr. Njuja at this time? Okay, we have one question regarding sharing your contact slide again, which we can do, and we'll also follow up with all of the registrants with that information, but certainly we can do that. And the other question is, have there been studies exploring how youth react to conflict or adversity in person versus virtually?
There have been some studies involving real-world bullying and resilience, and it's the same sort of thing where those students who measure high on a scale of resilience, they're able to cope better. They're more likely to be upstanders instead of bystanders. They deal with these issues in a more healthy way. So you can imagine the same sort of findings are relevant when you're thinking about cyberbullying, and we just need to continue to make sure people know that resilience is such a big deal, especially because we often just think about, okay, we just want to make sure the aggressors are not doing this. The aggressors need to be punished. The aggressors need to have various sorts of controls enacted. But the targets, they do have a role. Again, they're not responsible for, they don't deserve to be targeted, but they have a role here. And that's where resilience comes in.
Great. We have two more questions here. One is asking, with minor and mild insults, what are some actual wording you might use, such as humor or ouch, that hurt, or no response?
Yeah, so it depends on the scenario, Lorraine. And if you want to, talk in more detail, please feel free to drop me a note because, I want to know more about your child. But most of the time, what I find is that some youth just need to be told stop. Like they're trying to be funny or they're trying to be sarcastic and get their other friends to laugh, but they don't really realize that it's affecting, the target or the person who's being picked on. So just telling them to stop goes a long way. Not always, of course, but hopefully the person's conscience is triggered when they say something that crosses a line in those situations. So I would start with that.
Okay. And the final question we have looks like a yes or no question here. So prevention, building resilience and empathy are key, correct?
Yeah, I think they matter so much. And I would also add again to that moral development, which simply means them having a moral compass. We're very hesitant in schools to use the word morals, which I think is sad because it's just ethics. It's just having some sort of idea of right and wrong. And all of us would agree that if someone's being targeted in any capacity, regardless of what the peanut gallery would say, if they feel like they're being targeted, they're being targeted. And so it's unjust not to do anything about that. So as you're raising your children, as you're working with kids, try to make sure that they have a sense of justice. They have a sense of right and wrong. They know when someone is being unfairly treated and they're compelled to action, either in the moment or afterwards.
Wonderful. I think that's a great note to end on, great response to end our first session with you this morning or this afternoon. Thank you again so much for this first hour. Again, Dr. Hinduja will be back at 4 p.m. to speak specifically to educators and interventions that can be kind of put into place within the school and classroom environment. So thank you so much, Dr. Hinduja. We'll see you again at 4 o'clock.